Here is the thing that nobody talks about. A Victorian family in 1880 could sit in a parlor running at 65 degrees Fahrenheit in the middle of a London winter, heated by nothing but a coal grate and some very smart architecture. No furnace, no thermostat, no ductwork, and when their system failed, they did not freeze because the house itself was part of the heating plan. That is not an accident, that is engineering. Let me show you how it actually worked. To understand Victorian heating, you have to understand the world it came out of. For most of human history, keeping warm meant one open hearth in the center of a room, smoke going wherever it wanted, and everyone huddled around the same fire. By the early 1800s, industrial Britain had changed two things dramatically. Coal was suddenly cheap and abundant, and urban row houses were being built by the thousands. Those two facts collided to produce a heating culture unlike anything that came before it. The first thing Victorians got right was something most modern builders have completely abandoned: thermal mass. Their walls were solid brick or stone, often 9 to 13 inches thick, with internal brick partitions and massive chimney stacks running through the center of the structure. Brick has a low R value, meaning it is not a great insulator on its own, but it stores heat like a battery. Once those walls warmed up from continuous fires, they kept radiating that stored energy for hours after the fire died down. The house became the heater. The chimney stack deserves its own moment here because most people walk past it without understanding what they are looking at. A large Victorian chimney stack was not just a flue. It was a thermal spine running through the entire house, absorbing heat from every fire on every floor and slowly releasing it into the surrounding rooms. Some stacks served 4 or 5 fireplaces on different floors simultaneously, all sharing that single massive column of brick. When the fires were lit, the whole core of the house was warming up, not just the air in the room. Now here is where the Victorian approach gets genuinely clever, and where modern houses have quietly gone in the opposite direction. Victorian floor plans were compartmentalized by design. Small enclosed rooms, doors on every opening, a door at the bottom of the staircase to stop warm air from escaping upward, narrow corridors acting as thermal buffers, a vestibule at the front entrance creating an airlock so every time someone opened the front door, the cold did not flood straight into the living space. The layout itself was doing thermal work before a single fire was even lit. Compare that to the average new build house today. Open plan kitchen and living area, cathedral ceilings in some designs, large glass panels, lightweight timber frame walls with a few inches of fiberglass bats. That construction is perfectly comfortable when the forced air system is running. But the moment that system goes down, the house loses heat fast because there's almost no thermal mass to fall back on and no architectural zoning to contain what warmth you do generate. The Victorian house was resilient by design. The modern house is dependent by design. The Victorians also understood something about textiles that we have mostly forgotten. Heavy-lined curtains were not decoration. They were a thermal system. A properly hung set of Victorian window curtains with a net layer against the glass and a thick wool or silk-lined outer curtain trapped a layer of still air at the window surface and dramatically cut cold radiation from the glass into the room. They also used portieres, which were heavy curtains hung over doorways to stop drafts from moving between rooms. Every layer of fabric was doing a specific thermal job. Bed hangings are another one that sounds like pure historical curiosity until you think about the engineering. A 4-poster bed with heavy curtains drawn around it was essentially a personal sleeping tent. Your body heat, which is roughly equivalent to a small space heater running continuously, was trapped inside that fabric enclosure all night. The bedroom itself might drop to 40 degrees Fahrenheit by morning, but inside those curtains you were sitting in a microclimate your own body had generated. They solved the problem of heating a sleeping space without burning any fuel at all. Let me talk about the fireplace design itself, because not all fireplaces are equal, and the Victorians inherited some genuinely smart improvements. Count Rumford, working in the late 1700s, redesigned the traditional fireplace with a tall, shallow firebox and angled side walls that reflected radiant heat out into the room instead of letting it escape up the chimney. Victorian builders adopted and adapted this principle widely. The result was a fireplace that heated the room primarily through radiant energy, the same mechanism as the sun, rather than just warming the air directly above it. Now, here is the part that surprises most people. The Victorians did not just have fireplaces. By the 1880s, wealthier Victorian homes had something functionally identical to modern hydronic central heating. In 1854, a Connecticut inventor named Stephen Gould built what he called the mattress radiator, two iron sheets riveted together to form internal steam channels. That single innovation unlocked the idea of sending heat from one central boiler to multiple rooms through cast iron radiators. By the 1880s, this system was being installed in homes and buildings across Britain and North America. They solved this centuries ago. The question is why we forgot. By the time Victoria's reign ended in 1901, a well-appointed townhouse in London or New York could have a single coal boiler in the basement sending hot water or steam to radiators on every floor. They did not call it HVAC. They called it comfort. The working-class family down the street was still relying on the kitchen range and a coal grate in the parlor, but even that house was built around the principle of capturing and holding heat rather than just generating it and letting it leak away. The gravity warm air furnace is another piece of Victorian technology that deserves more credit. In some houses, a coal firebox in the basement heated air that rose naturally through large ducts and floor registers into the rooms above. No fan, no motor, just the physics of hot air rising and cool air falling back through return ducts or open stairwells. It was less efficient than a modern forced air system, so fireplaces were still kept as backup and boost heat. But the principle of a single heat source serving multiple rooms through passive convection was already fully understood and deployed. Here is the practical reality of what Victorian warmth actually looked like in numbers. Historical reconstructions of British domestic temperatures suggest that a heated middle-class parlor on a winter evening was running somewhere between 59 and 64 degrees Fahrenheit. That is not tropical, but it is exactly the range that a lot of modern off-grid cabins and frugal homesteads operate at today and consider perfectly livable. The bedrooms were cold, yes, but the rooms they actually used for daily life were not dramatically different from what a careful modern household accepts as comfortable. The fuel cost is worth being honest about. Victorian warmth was not free. Contemporary accounts suggest that an urban middle-class British household around 1900 might burn several tons of coal per year for heating and cooking combined. That is a serious energy input. What made the system work was that the house was designed to turn that fuel into lasting stored heat rather than quick drafts that vanished the moment the fire dropped. The coal was expensive. The architecture made every unit of that coal work as hard as possible. The design and the fuel were a match system. This is not fringe theory. This is documented engineering. The Victorian approach to heating was a layered system where every element reinforced every other element. Thick masonry walls stored heat. Compartmentalized rooms contained it. Heavy textiles blocked drafts at windows and doorways. Chimney stacks acted as thermal spines. Bed hangings created personal microclimates at night. And where the budget allowed, early radiator systems extended a single heat source across an entire structure. Remove any one layer, and the system still functions. Remove all of them, and you have a modern house. The lesson here is not that we should all rip out our furnaces and go back to coal grates. The lesson is that the Victorians built resilience directly into the structure of the house rather than outsourcing all of it to a single mechanical system. If you are thinking about your own property and what happens when the central heat goes down for a week, the Victorian playbook is directly applicable. Thermal mass, where you can add it. Compartmentalized spaces you can actually heat with a single local source. Heavy textiles at the thermal weak points. These are not antiques. They are backup systems. The old ways worked for a reason. Let me show you why. Victorian builders were not smarter than us, but they were solving a harder problem. They had to make a house warm without reliable mechanical backup, and they solved it by making the building itself do most of the work. We built over that knowledge with cheap energy and cheap construction, and now a lot of homeowners are one furnace failure away from finding out their house has no thermal strategy at all. If this channel is about anything, it is about understanding the engineering well enough to bring the right pieces of it back. Thanks for watching. I will see you in the next one.